Dublin with a very convincing win over Laois here at Croke Park, 231 to 23 points. It's a 14-point win and very much atoning for last year's preliminary quarter-final loss down in Portlaoise. And I'm sure that would have been very much at the forefront of Matty Kenny and his team's mind here. Like, it's a hugely different team for this time a year ago. If you consider some of the players that were brought in off the bench, and this is a kind of a luxury, and you would imagine maybe part of the plan going forward against Kilkenny, that you can bring in the likes of Eamon Trolley or Dillon. He scored 1-1. Mark Shuta scored a point. Liam Rush came on, made a little bit of an impact. He's played so little in the last while that probably take him a bit of time to get up to speed. Jake Malone would have started a lot of games last year. Shane Barrett has been a crucial member there the last couple of years. But the player that stood out more than anybody is Donal Burke. Now, he wasn't there last year. Connor Burke, I don't think. I think they might have both been in America. But Connor Burke played sweeper. He scored a couple of points, got on a load of ball. Now, to be fair, Laois were playing Ross King for most of the game as the only man up front and relying on scores from out the field, which is probably something we also saw here at Croke Park against Tipperary last year. And it worked to some degree for a while, but you could just feel that Dublin's physicality and intensity, that they weren't going to be caught this year. They were missing an awful lot of players last year too. Laois are down players this year as well. There's no point in just ignoring that. Like, it was at times an okay performance from Laois, but because they felt they needed to flood the middle area with extra players, make sure they had a man sitting back, which in the first half was Sean Downey. Paddy Purcell actually came back in the second half. It was just always going to be very difficult for them to create goal scoring opportunities, which they didn't come. Now, Donal Burke got a brilliant one in the first half. He got onto a loose ball, solo through, just very really calm on the ball, and just off the stick, his catches, he had them all taken, and just off the stick and straight a low past Enda Rowland. And also, actually, in the second half, he did an amazing little passage at one stage where he was soloing in between two or three lads. He'd run out of catches again, so he just flicked it over his head behind for Mark Shuta to knock it over the bar. And yeah, so just a couple of points that I jotted down during the first half about this particular game that stood out to me. That Paddy Purcell, who was always going to be a key man for Laois, he was shut down largely by Dara Gray. Now, he'd scored a point in the first half, but Dara Gray did a good man marking job on him, and he was moving out around the field. Now, Sean Moran was named as number 8, but he largely played in the half back line. He started the game on James Ryan. I'm not sure if he just swapped him out at different points of the game. What else stood out to me? Well, Keem Boland. I mean, he's a guy, I couldn't understand him being taken off in the preliminary quarter final last year. I thought he was playing well against Laois. He's probably established himself a bit more or sooner than now, if it wasn't for persistent injury problems. He was excellent at wing forward. He scored a couple of points in the first half, constantly winning the ball. Donal Burke, something like 115 by the end of the game, unerring on the frees. And actually, I tweeted something about an hour into the game saying the free take has been incredible. Ross King hadn't missed, Donal Burke hadn't missed, Enda Rowland hadn't missed, and then all of a sudden for the rest of the game they couldn't stop missing. But I suppose that's the way it goes. But in the first half, one of the signs that Dublin were on top was that from play they'd scored 1-9, Laois had scored 6, and Davy Keogh was playing full forward, and I thought he'd be one of these players that would come out the field, while the likes of maybe Ronan Hayes, who worked hard but it didn't quite happen for him, and Donal Burke might stay inside. But actually, Davy Keogh stayed inside with Ronan Hayes. And yeah, Davy Keogh got a point. Doesn't look like he's always a scoring threat, but he's a great man to win a ball and take on his man. Danny Sutcliffe gets on so much ball, and he's excellent dynamic player and all that kind of stuff. But I just feel if he used the players around him a little bit more, he'd create an awful lot of scoring opportunities and probably get the ball back and have simple scores for himself. Sometimes tries to do too much, and I think that's probably frustrates his teammates a little bit, but he did an awful lot of good things too, so it's not all bad there. What else was I going to look at? Yeah, Dublin got a second goal at the end from Eamon Trolley or Dillon. Really good player, but probably would be a little bit frustrated that they didn't create more goal chances in a game where they were just largely on top throughout the entire game. And other than that, will the extra game be an advantage for Dublin? Because there was times there in the first half where I felt a couple of the players on both sides were blowing, and we know generally Dublin are a very fit team. No matter how good or bad they're going, they're generally a fit team. A couple of players blowing, and I think maybe getting that extra game in, which Kilkenny won't have, assuming that there are no real injuries, that might actually stand to them, because you've gotten used to that, you've gone through it, you know you can do it. Um, so yeah, that would have been about it. Some positives for Laois. I think Ross King, he didn't score from play, but he was a danger. I think Paddy Smith had a little bit of trouble with him at times. Picky Maher, some nice scores. Paddy personally got two. As I said, he went back kind of as the spare man at the back in the second half when he couldn't get on too much ball in the first half. Aaron Dunphy got a couple of scores. So it's into the qualifiers for Laois, and it's probably going to be, no matter who they get, it's going to be a tough draw. But for Dublin, I mean, if you look at it on the whole in the last couple of years, we talked about this in a few of the shows previewing this particular match. They've generally been ahead or neck and neck with Wexford, with Galway, with Kilkenny in the Leinster Championship the last couple of seasons since Pat Gilroy came in, and now Matthews after taking over again his second season now. They've largely been right there neck and neck. That Laois game last year was obviously so high profile and made such an impact. It was such a shock for them to lose that game that maybe people are underestimating them. And Kilkenny tend to have the edge over Dublin if you take 2013 out of the equation. But they're not a bad team. They're just because they had one bad performance last year. They still did beat Galway. They won in Thurles in the league in a knockout game. It is league, but you can't ignore it either. I see Matty Kenny down there talking with a number of his players after the game. Not sure what message he's getting on board. He actually, a quick word on Chris Crummy. Scored 3 points from centre forward. At times looked a little bit like a fish out of water. Like, he is a half back and he's an absolutely brilliant half back. He did make an impact on the game, no doubt about it. But I wonder if they will persist with that. Probably won't change the team a whole pile, but Dublin very much on top throughout the whole game. As I said, finished at 231 to 23 points. Like, even if you're confident, knowing you can put up that sort of score in return. And if Donal Burke can back up that performance, and as much on the frees as anything else, because it's different gravy when you're playing against a team like Kilkenny. Need to nail those frees. That's a huge thing. So yeah, big win for Dublin, and absolutely deserved.